happens every day and everywhere. Unfortunately, it is an inevitable part of life. And another unfortunate thing is that conflict usually carries a negative connotation with it. But positive things can come from conflicts, like growth and understanding, change. There are instances, however, where conflict is completely preventable and unnecessary. At work, conflict can happen with a coworker or your supervisor. It can happen with a client, and unwanted consequences can come from conflict with them. So things like losing a job promotion, or losing a great business connection, or an important contract with a client. I believe a lack of interpersonal communication skills puts us all at a higher risk of having conflict with someone else. So what I want to talk about are areas where conflict can frequently arise, and introduce some concepts, tools, and tips that can help us better understand communication at work and prevent these misunderstandings. The two concepts I want to mainly talk about are fundamental attribution error and disconfirming and confirming messages. But before we really get into those two concepts, I want to talk more about what communication really is. So we've all applied for many, many jobs, and usually on those job listings, we see, requirement, great communication skills, great interpersonal skills, great oral communication skills. And we've probably, all of us at least have that listed somewhere on our resume. But what is communication really? At its most basic, communication is a revolving door of sending and receiving messages. There are three main, now communication is actually much more complex than that, but for our purposes today, we're going to keep it as simple as possible. So the three main aspects of communication for our presentation today are messages, content, and context. Messages can be verbal or nonverbal, like saying hello or just simply waving. Content is essentially what you're talking about, and context can be like a relational context. So at work, it can look like employee with employee, employee with supervisor, or employee with your client. One important thing to remember about communication is not static. It is a fluid system, and it's always changing. Paul Watzlawick once said, "You cannot not communicate." According to the World Heritage Encyclopedia, Paul Watzlawick is a philosopher and a communication theorist, among other things. This idea, one cannot not communicate, is actually the first axiom of his 5 axioms of communication. Now, the basic idea behind his first axiom is that every single behavior is a form of communication. Even if communication is being avoided consciously or subconsciously, that act of avoidance in and of itself is also communicating. So someone walks into a room, you're at work and someone walks into a room, and you see them and you immediately turn around and bolt the other way. You are trying to avoid communication with this person for whatever reason. But in that act of avoidance, you're communicating to them, I don't want to see you, I don't want to talk to you, so I'm leaving. Neil Katz and Linda Flynn wrote an article called Understanding Conflict Management Systems and Strategies in the Workplace. In that article, they cite research done by Daniel Dana. The research used exit interview data and showed that 50% or more of voluntary resignations were related directly to unresolved conflict, and 90% of involuntary terminations. So 50% of the exit interview data, 50% of those people showed that they quit because of unresolved conflict, whether that conflict was interpersonal or procedural, and 90% of the people who got fired of that exit interview data was fired because of the same reason. So, this really highlights how important it is that we all understand how we communicate, especially at work. Conflict can happen when we pass judgment too quickly. So a great example of this is the fundamental attribution error. Corey Floyd, who wrote a book called Interpersonal Communication, defines the fundamental attribution error as assuming a person's behavior is caused by internal factors instead of external factors. So a great example of this is, okay, so by a show of hands, how many of you have ever been cut off when you're driving down the road? I have. And my first thought, would you believe me if I said my first thought was, oh, he must be in a rush to the airport, or oh, he might be taking someone to the ER. No, you'd all think I was a big fat liar. My first thought is usually, what a jerk. He doesn't know how to drive. Who gave him a driver's license? He must need glasses he can't see. He can't see me driving in this lane right here. So that's a great example of fundamental attribution error. The way it looks at work could be like, for example, this picture. This is me. I'm the CEO, and I see Bob coming in late to work. Now it's 8 o'clock and he's not here yet, so I could think one of two things. It's because of an internal factor, his personality. He's just an unreliable person. Or it could be an external factor based on a situation. Maybe there was a huge car accident and he got stuck in traffic.